source for everything paranormal. ParaX. Throughout the ages, history has been altered by word of mouth and the misrepresentation of those who might not have been present when some of the world's most significant events took place. Channelers Barry and Connie Strohm bring through the spirits of those who actually witnessed or took part in these historical events and lets them tell their stories in their own words. Welcome to Channeling History. And now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Channeling History. We're the only show where we speak to the souls that made things happen. I hope that you've had a wonderful Christmas and that the new year, the 2021, is going to be far better than the one that we've just gone through. We are brought to you tonight on the ParaX Radio Network. I'm Barry Strohm, your host, and I will be doing the channeling tonight.
And I'm Connie Strohm, your co-host, and I will be asking the questions of our spirit guest tonight, as usual. Tonight we have a very special spirit guest, Nostradamus, the famous French astrologer whose predictions have endured through the ages. Nostradamus lived during the 16th century and wrote predictions in a complex poetic form called Quatrains. These quatrains have been very difficult to translate and interpret. Modern authors have attributed him with predictions of the rise of Hitler, destruction of the Twin Towers, and even the invention of the atomic bomb.
Well, most of our shows are going to be dedicated to interviewing historic and famous figures. We're planning several special shows in the future in which we hope to solve mysteries and even unsolved crimes. In April, we're going to be doing a show concerning the sinking of the Titanic, where we're going to interview the captain of the ship and actually let him tell us what happened. We're also going to be doing a show concerning unsolved mysteries that will include Jack the Ripper and what happened to D.B. Cooper. We welcome suggestions from you, the listeners, for future shows. Please submit questions in advance for our spirit guests to our email. It's channelinghistoryoonparax@gmail.com. That's channelinghistoryoonparax@gmail.com.
We like to think that we have one of the most unique shows on the radio. For one thing, with a few exceptions, all of our guests are dead, and you will not hear them appearing on any other shows. When we channel one of our spirit guests, we never have any idea of how the questions will be answered. We're not perfect. Sometimes we get answers that are not correct. Sometimes another spirit will slip in and Barry will not pick up on an energy change. When Barry's channeling, he rarely remembers the content of the messages he receives. There's also a possibility that he's not correctly speaking the words. What we do is not an exact science, but we do the best we can. There are times we have a problem with the accuracy of dates, because in early times, individuals did not have calendars and would not have been aware of the years referenced in modern calendars. Many individuals have no idea how old they were in ancient times.
We always welcome your questions through the chat room. While we do have questions prepared for our guests, we always welcome your participation. In our previous shows, we have had many interesting guests. All of our shows are available on our YouTube channel in my name, Barry Strohm, on Podomatic, iTunes, or Spotify for download or just to listen. When we begin our channeling tonight, Connie will ask the questions, and I will answer the questions in the words of the spirits. We have a great show tonight, so let's begin speaking to our spirit guest, Nostradamus. Now, if those of you that have listened know that before we channel, we always say a prayer of protection. Connie will now say the prayer, and then we will begin to channel with our guest, Nostradamus.
God, please grant us your wisdom and protection. Grant us the knowledge that we can handle and keep us safe from all things that will harm us. Keep the messages positive and pure love. Keep us safe from our egos. We ask these things in the light of the seen, the unseen, and the honesty of God. Amen. Nostradamus, would you like to begin with an opening message for us?
Yes, I would. I am very proud that you have asked us to come back and speak once more. When I spoke with you before, I enjoyed it, and I am very happy that we can do it once more time. So I know that you have a lot of very interesting questions for me, and I know that I will try to answer them honestly for you. So, if you have questions, why don't we begin?
I definitely have questions. You lived in a very difficult time, the 16th century, during the time of the plagues and the Inquisition. Would you tell us what life was like in the 16th century?
In the 16th century, it was very difficult. There were none of the modern conveniences that you have today. We suffered from many illnesses and often had no idea what to do in an attempt to cure them. When I lived, the plague was a very terrible thing. We had no idea what it was or how we could cure it. And it was taking many people from us. It was also a time when the Catholic Church was conducting an inquisition for anyone that would even hint that they were listening to the words of Martin Luther and what he was speaking of for a reformation from the Catholic Church. It was very hard to get an education, and it was very difficult to earn a living and raise a family. It was very common that we would see many deaths among the young, and life expectancies were very short. So life in the 16th century was indeed very different from what you are seeing today.
Okay. Was Nostradamus your real name?
No, I was French, and I had a very long name, and through the years, people shortened it to just simply Nostradamus.
Okay, you were trained as an apothecary. Will you describe the work of an apothecary during the 16th century?
Well, in the 16th century, there were no pharmacies, and we relied upon natural drugs to attempt to heal illnesses. An apothecary in those days would try to work with natural cures. They would try to come up with different medicines that would work. They would try to do what they could to use what herbs nature provided for us. We were not doctors, but we did try to cure.
Okay. Did you try to obtain a medical degree?
Yes. I attempted to go to the university and obtain a medical degree. However, they looked down, the elite people at the university looked down at the work of apothecaries and thought that it was more of an occupation befitting a commoner. So they did not allow me. It was more of an occupation befitting a commoner. So they did not allow me to attend the university because they learned that I had been working previously as an apothecary.
Did you ever have a license to practice medicine?
In those days, you were not required to have a license to practice medicine. That is more a modern phenomenon. But I did acquire certain skills, and I did attempt to cure many.
Okay. What was the cause of death of your first wife and children?
Sadly, they died of the plague. It happened while I was out of town and was not with them in their final days. It was a terrible time in my life, and it was a terrible time for many that lived as well. There were many, many taken by the plague in my time. We just simply did not understand. We did our best, but we did not really know how to cure it.
Okay, we have our first question from the chat room already. It says, "Hi, Nostradamus. I read that you predicted 2020 virus. Was that predicted? Is it for 2021?
No, I did not predict that. Many try to misinterpret my words, but I did not have any way of predicting the virus that you are now going through.
Okay. Do you have any predictions for 2021?
Yes, I will give you a prediction, because now that I'm on the other side, I can see the future and I can see the past. So, while I must be careful in what I give you for a prediction, I will tell you that the country of China is attempting to take over the world, and you are entering a time where you need to be very cautious with how you treat China and how you meet their demands. I can tell you with certainty that the country of China hopes to eventually control the world.
That's scary. Okay, back in the day, did you know what caused the plague?
No, we had no idea. But you have to understand that we lived in much filth. Sanitation was mostly unheard of. It was not uncommon to throw bathroom waste in the street. Water was contaminated, and there were rats everywhere. So we didn't understand it. But when I did try to treat those with the plague, I tried to keep things as clean as possible. I thought it was just common sense that cleanliness would help to cure or offset the plague.
What cure did you use for the plague?
Well, as I just said, we tried to keep things as clean as possible. And people with the plague would develop boils, and we would try to pierce those and relieve the pressure. So there was very little we really could do because we simply did not understand. I never tried to let blood as many of the physicians did, but we did use piercings to try to relieve pressure.
Okay. Did you study astrology?
I did, but I was never very good at it. I thought it was very complicated, and the more I studied it, I wasn't really sure how it affected daily lives or the future. I relied on the work of other astrologers that were much more astute in the study of that science.
Okay. Did you ever practice the occult?
No, I never practiced the occult. For one thing, with the Inquisition going on, I felt that I had to be very careful, because if you were accused of practicing the occult, it was practically a death sentence. And I would point out, it was not a pleasant death. So I was very careful. I tried not to arouse the suspicion of the church in my activities.
Okay. What was your opinion of God?
I always firmly believed in God. I was a devout Catholic. My family was Jewish, but with the Inquisition, they converted to Catholicism, and I believed the writings of the gospel that were presented to me at the time. I always knew that God was the ultimate power, and that my belief in him never wavered.
Okay, we have another good question from our chat room. It says, Nostradamus, being that you worked in the field of natural medicine, is there anything you can advise us to do to keep our immune system strong during this time of corona?
Well, what I learned during my time would be of little help to you. But I can tell you this. Try to do the best you can for your immune system. Eat foods or take supplements that are rich in vitamin C, and vitamin D seems to be very important as well. Try to stay away from anything that will pull down your immune system. Get exercise, and do not go to places where you fear that the virus is present. Use common sense. That's what we tried to do in my time, and it is also valuable information for trying to avoid the illnesses of today.
Common sense has always been good. Okay, another question from our chat. How old were you when you realized your gift of prediction of what was to come?
Well, that is a tricky question. And I'm hesitating here, my gift of prediction is not what people think it was. I did have some psychic abilities, and much of what I predicted was based on historical fact, and I would often use images from the Gospels. You'll notice I'm not saying that I truly had a strong gift of prediction or that I was ever truly a prophet. So I realized when I was in my 30s that people were very anxious to know of the future. That is no different than it is today. So I started to write and make basic predictions, many of which were based on what had taken place in the past. So, if you want to know when I felt that it would be to my advantage to write of predictions and of the future, it would be in my mid-30s.
Okay, thank you. What was your opinion of heaven and hell?
Being a devout Catholic, I firmly believed in the concept of heaven and hell. Now that I'm on the other side, I realize that heaven is real, but the concept that the church told us about hell was not. I understand now how the concept of hell was used to introduce fear to those that were members of the church. Now that I'm on the other side, I realize that there is a bottom level, but it is not a place of fire and the other extremes that we were taught in the 16th century.
Yeah. Have you seen Jesus?
I had not seen Jesus until the last time that you asked me to channel with you. He actually came to me and asked if I would go to you and answer questions. I was very pleased to be able to comply with his wishes. And when you asked for me one more time for tonight, he appeared to me again. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to truly have truly seen Jesus on this side.
Our pleasure. Okay, how were you received in heaven when you returned from your life as Nostradamus?
My guides were fairly pleased with my life because I had worked very hard to cure others and to heal those that were very sick at a time when many refused to work with the ill. They were very pleased that I had fulfilled that part of my life plan. So in general, when I returned, I was greeted by the guides, and in their judgments, they were very generous. I have progressed in the realm since my life as Nostradamus, and that is because they were very pleased with how I lived that lifetime.
Okay, you lived at the time of the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. What was your opinion of the Protestant Reformation?
I was very opposed to it. I was taught that the only way to heaven was through the teachings of the Catholic Church. I looked upon the work of Martin Luther as that of the work of a heretic. He was wise to have fled and not stayed in an area where he could have become a victim of the Inquisition that was taking place.
Yeah. Okay. Can you describe what it was like to live during that Inquisition?
It was a very, very difficult time. If you were accused of being a heretic, you could be found guilty without ever being able to defend yourself. It was not uncommon that they would apply torture in order to extract a confession. And then once that confession was extracted, it was not uncommon for them to take your life. And that often meant being burned at the stake. So It was very difficult. You had to protect yourself, and you had to fear that any individual could accuse you and that the judges would listen to them. The Inquisition lasted for hundreds of years, and it was indeed a very difficult time.
Yeah. When you lived the life of Nostradamus, did you have psychic abilities?
I did have some minor psychic abilities. My guides would come to me in dreams, and they would often give me messages. Those messages would be how they expected me to live my life, how they respected the fact that I was trying to help the sick, and they gave me some other messages, but they did not give me many messages concerning the future. I did have minor psychic abilities. Nothing like I am seeing from you and Barry, but I did receive messages, mostly in dreams, and I did try to pay attention to what those messages meant.
So did you actually believe that you could predict the future at that time?
No. I really never felt that I could predict the future. I knew that I could calculate what I felt would take place in the future by studying historic documents and paying attention to what was going on around me. There were those that wrote of future predictions, and I did base some of my assumptions on their writings. But I can say that there was never a time that I was given information that would affect future lives, and that is one reason why in my writings I would make it very difficult to interpret the true meanings of what I was saying. I was multilingual, and I would often use different languages and different types of poetic structure. So it was not truly a fact that I could see future events that would take place far in the future.
Okay, I think you just answered another question that we had from the chat room, wanting to know, why did you write in the form of the quatrains?
Because I didn't want people to be able to translate what I was writing. If they were never sure of what I was saying, it would build their anticipation into my meanings. If I was to make a direct prediction of the future and it didn't come true, it would have destroyed what I was attempting to write about. It was very important that people were kept, shall we say, in the dark, and that my true intentions of my writings were very difficult to decipher.
Okay. Did you consider yourself a prophet?
No, I never considered myself a prophet. Because as I said, it was not something that I was hearing verbatim from the spirits. So no, I never ever considered myself a prophet. Okay, let's take a little break here, and we'll be back in a couple minutes.
Thanks for listening to Channeling History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode as
Sorry about that. My computer is not doing what it's supposed to be doing here. So anyway, let's get back to channeling, and we will not be taking a break today.
Darn computers picking on us old people again.
Okay, question.
Okay. So, Nostradamus, what was the source of your predictions?
I was, modestly say, a very intelligent person for my time. I was very well educated, and I knew that I could use different languages and study historical writings. There were many out there at the time that were trying to make predictions, and what I would do is I would, shall we say, copy some of their works. I would rephrase it, but many of the things that I wrote of were not of my original work.
Okay, how much of your writings were based on the work of others?
I would say maybe half of what I did was based on the work of others. Keep in mind, in those days, it was not a problem. And I could use other writings and modify them and make them more understandable.
Okay. Did you really envision the modern world in any way?
Absolutely not. There was no way that I could have ever envisioned all of this. Think of the advances that you have made in technology, in weaponry, in communication. None of this was ever a fact in my time. We did not even understand the term bacteria. We had no idea how to cure things. And while I had some modest ideas, I would think that there was no way that anyone could have predicted what would be taking place today.
Okay. How were the formulas for medicines determined back in the 16th century?
It was basically trial and error. We would try an herb, and we would see if it would work. We would compare notes. Sometimes an herb would be effective for some type of illness, and sometimes we would think it would work, but that we were very mistaken by it. It is possible that much of what was learned during the 16th century was kept secret, because if you were accused of using the occult to cure, you could have been punished and even killed by the church. So there was no well-defined way. There were medical institutions where individuals studied what was known. Modern anatomy was just being discovered at that time. Much of what we attempted, we feared, would never work because of the Inquisition. You have to understand just how much that affected our lives. If we were accused of the occult, it was a death sentence.
That's terrible. Have you reincarnated since your life as Nostradamus?
Yes, I have returned one time since my life as Nostradamus. I came back in the 18th century and was a doctor. It seems as though my reincarnate lives are tied into the medical field. It is wonderful to be able to heal others. In the 18th century, we still did not envision any of the modern practices. We were very slow to learn how infection came about in wounds and how it usually resulted in the death of the patient. But I tried to move forward with research in the medical field in that lifetime. And I am amazed as I look around and see that all that is happening today in the medical field, you are on the verge of some wonderful discoveries. You will soon see that some of your most feared illnesses, such as Alzheimer's or dementia, will find cures. So, if I decide to return in the future, I think that I will try to have a life path of a medical researcher. It seems to me that that would be a wonderful path to take for a future life.
Indeed. Okay, one more question about your predictions. Did you ever carry out any magic to support those predictions?
No. Once again, if you perform magic, you could have been victimized by the Inquisition. I was very, very careful in what I did. It was very difficult times, and I did not want to get drawn up into that.
Understandable. Okay, let's look at King Henry. He was killed as a result of a jousting accident. Did you accurately predict the death of King Henry?
No. I made it appear that I had made predictions in the past that would have warned him of his upcoming death. But I did not accurately predict the death of King Henry.
Okay, Catherine Medici, who was his wife, she assumed the influence after the king died. What was your relationship with her?
She believed that I truly had the ability to predict the future. She believed that my writings of the prediction of the death of her husband had actually taken place. She made me a position of power within the government and actually made me a special consultant to her son. I would attempt to give them advice on the future, but I always made that advice based on common sense and what I felt would be the best path. So she was a very important sponsor for me, and because of her sponsorship, I became a fairly wealthy person.
Okay, at that time, were you ever in danger by the Inquisition?
Yes. There were several times that I was accused of using the occult. Thankfully, by that time, I did have some people in high places, and they did arrange to protect me. But yes, I was accused at times, and I was very fearful of the power of the church.
Okay, so why were you imprisoned?
in those days, you needed to have writings approved. And I slipped up and did not follow some of the regulations and approvals that were required in some of my writings. That I was put in prison for a short period of time because of that. But once again, I had people that could protect me, and I was released.
Thank the Lord. Back to the chat room. Did you predict Adolf Hitler, and are there other fascists coming?
No, I did not predict the rise of Hitler. It is written that when I spoke of the word hister, that I was referring to Hitler, but I was not. In those days, the Danube River was referred to as hister, and I was predicting things or events that would occur as a result of the location or flow of the Danube. So anyway, no. There was no way that I ever foresaw the rise of Hitler.
Okay, in one of your writings, you referred to a battle in the clouds. What were you referring to in that comment?
One night, I had a dream, and it appeared as though there were events taking place in the clouds. I referred to it in my writings as a battle in the clouds. It was much as if there were strange shapes in my dreams. And I do believe that may have been one of the times that my guides did show me the answer to a future event.
So then, did you ever accurately predict an event before it occurred?
I never really was very accurate. I did, through logic, write of things that would occur. So you have to differentiate between events that I would have been told through the spirits or through psychic events, or events that I could predict from historical documents. For instance, Germany was always at war with somebody. So when I wrote that there would be a future event where Germany would be at war, it was common sense. People have taken that writing and interpreted it to mean the rise of Hitler. But what I wrote was just common sense. Germany was always at war with someone. So why not write about it and predict the future from past events?
Okay, back to the chat room. How many of your predictions actually came true?
I have no idea. Because many of them, as I said, were predicated on past events that you could rely upon, such as the German prediction. I never kept track. I was very prolific in what I wrote because people wanted to buy my writings. It was how I earned a living. So I never really kept track. But if something happened that I had predicted, I was very quick to point out that I had predicted it. But I truly never kept track.
Okay. Did you ever base any of your predictions on the book of Revelations?
Oh, absolutely. Revelations was a wonderful source to draw upon. In my day, we believed Revelation. Everybody wanted to know when the world was going to end. So, if I wrote and made a prediction as to the end of the world, it was something that everybody wanted to hear. So yes, Revelations was a wonderful source for my writings. But now that I'm on the other side, I know that there is nothing in Revelations that is accurate. It was a creation of the church to create fear and to make people follow the church as the only path to heaven.
Did you ever predict the end of the world?
I hinted at it. I never came out and said that there would be a specific time. That was why the wording of the quatrains were so important. I could disguise a prediction and make it look like it was real. So I must say that I was quite clever in what I did.
But if you were. Okay, another question from the chat. Did you use scrying technique when you're doing your forecasts? I will have to be educated. I do not know what scrying is.
No. There were people that practiced the occult and used scrying in my time. But as I said earlier, I was very careful not to use or refer to anything that would empower the inquisitioners. It is very hard for you to understand just how difficult a time it was.
Yeah. Okay, another question. According to the movie The Man Who Saw Tomorrow, it was said that you predicted an Antichrist from the Middle East. Do you see an Antichrist coming?
Well, now that I'm over here, I can tell you that there are many that could assume the role of Antichrist. There will never be one Antichrist. There is evil energy everywhere, and there is especially a lot of evil energy in the Middle East at this time. While the Muslim faith is a wonderful faith, there are many that have subverted its meaning and could enact violence and use weapons of mass destruction. So, there are many that can be considered the Antichrist. As your population grows and as evil grows, there is more and more evil. There are many that do not follow the words of God or the religious prophets that preach love. So any of those that speak contrary to teachings of love and want to harm others are essentially acting as an Antichrist.
True. How did you die? Did you predict that?
I had many physical problems in life. I had arthritis, I had gout, and I had great amounts of fluid retention in my body. In those days, we did not have any idea how to treat any of those illnesses. When I died, it was because the fluids overloaded my heart and my heart ceased to function. Today you would probably call that a heart attack. I knew that I was becoming gravely ill. I could feel that my heart was not beating regularly, and I felt that my time would be near. So I did tell those close to me that my time of death was rapidly approaching. But once again, that was based on what was taking place. You did not have to be a prophet to know that my time of death was very close at the time.
Very true. So, Nostradamus, what do you think when you see authors attributing your predictions to current events?
I think it is quite humorous, to be honest with you. I wrote in a very difficult style in ancient languages, and there are many that are spending huge amounts of time attempting to interpret the words that I wrote. As I said, there was no way I could see the modern life that you folks are living. I was very successful in writing in a very complex manner. And I was very successful in using the works of others to predict historical probabilities. And I am truly amazed that there are so many people that are currently paying so much attention to my work.
Was writing predictions a part of your life plan?
No. It was always part of my life plan that I would be a writer and an author, and that I would affect others in my writings. But the prediction part was not truly part of the life plan with which I was sent back.
Okay. You said you reincarnated once since you were Nostradamus, and you were a doctor. Could you tell us a little more about that lifetime?
I lived in France, and I was active with the military in taking part of many of the wars that were taking place during the 18th century. As a medical doctor, I tried to save those that were wounded. Sadly, at that time, we did not understand the concept of bacteria and what was required to keep wounds clean. Yeah. I tried my best to advance medical science, and in fact I did save many lives. But it was a very violent time to live in Europe.
Yes. Are you planning to reincarnate again?
Yes, I think I'm going to. The way medical science is advancing, I think that I can return and be involved in research and do great things for people. I think that it will not be too long.
Okay, do you have a final message for us?
Yes, I would like to thank all of you for allowing me to speak to you tonight. I would like to thank Barry and Connie for asking me to return and giving me this opportunity. What I would tell all of you is use your common sense when you are trying to determine the future. Many that feel that they can tell the future are frauds and are just trying to make money off of their predictions. Look at the past and use it as a tool to interpret the future. That is what I did. In my day, I could copy others' ideas. But today you have access to an incredible amount of historic information. Use that information and make your own decisions. Do not rely on others to make decisions or to give information for you. So with that, I'm going to say good night. Thank you for having me, and I hope that my answers were satisfactory for you.
Thank you, Nostradamus. We really enjoyed it.
Yes. Now next week, we're going to be channeling with Robin Williams. The current pandemic has caused much depression, and suicide rates are increasing as a result of the isolation that people are having to go through. I thought that we would do an interview about a spirit that committed suicide, and let him tell you personally what happens to the souls that kill themselves. We have done a session with him before, and I assure you that it's going to be a very interesting interview. You can submit questions in advance through our email. That's channelinghistory on parax@gmail.com. My 7th book, Spirit Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. It's also available on Kindle for immediate download. Signed copies are only available on my websites, spiritspredict.com or wordsofgodthenandnow.com. My previous book, Spirit Speak, Channeling the Life of Jesus, told of his life, and this current book tells of his messages and the messages of those closest to him. So I want to thank all of you for tuning in. Please be with us next week when we channel with Robin Williams. I assure you that it is going to be worthwhile and that it will be a very interesting interview. So good night. Thank you for listening, and we will return on the Parax Radio Network.
God bless you all.
Thanks for listening to Channeling History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode, as we never know who will make an appearance or who will come through the portal. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2020. Our Story Begins by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.